The power to block content must be used sparingly. The order of Ministry of Information and Broadcasting directing the removal of a cartoon featuring the Prime Minister Narendra Modi from a Tamil magazine's website is unwarranted and many may not fall under any of the permissible grounds for such removal. Vikatan Plus, an online-only magazine published by Vikatan Group, has decided to take legal steps to challenge the order. It had earlier defended the content at the hearing between an inter-departmental inquiry constituted under the IT Rules 2021. The ministry's move against the cartoon goes against both freedom of expression and freedom of the press. The cartoon is a piece of trenchant political commentary and it depicted Mr. Modi shackled in chains in presence of the United States President Donald Trump. This is an apparent reference to criticism voiced in some quarters that Mr. Modi failed to protest against the ill treatment of Indian illegal immigrants deported from the US. Prime Minister's approach to foreign policy issues cannot be immune to symbolic denunciation through a cartoon. It is even more concerning through the Vikatan website itself has been rendered inaccessible to some users, apparently based on undisclosed orders and informal instructions to web service providers. While a formal order to take down content is provided for in law, it will be wholly untenable if the website was sought to be blocked without recourse to established procedure. The claim that the website has been inaccessible to since February 15 has not been denied so far. Section 69A of the IT Act empowers the government to block content on specified grounds, including the interest of friendly relations with foreign states or public order, or for preventing incitement to the commission of a cognizable offense. But it is not known what these grounds which of these grounds has been invoked, as the order is confidential. How an order passed in the exercise of a statutory power can be deemed as a secret is inexplicable. Even in times like the present, when taking offense is a national pastime, as well as reasons for several chief ministers to unleash police for their detractors, cartoons ought to enjoy greater immunity than the written world. In this case, it is doubtful if the political criticism through a cartoon can be deemed to affect friendly ties with US or undermine public order. The center would do well to reverse the blocking order soon. The power to block content ought to be used sparingly, mainly to combat offensive content such as hate speech, incitement to violence, and child pornography, but not in deference to political demand and without regard to political expression. Entrenched patriarchal biases must be erased from society, government. If institutions are serious about rooting out sexism, they must walk the talk instead of merely celebrating the entry of more women in the workforce. They have to provide an enabling atmosphere for those on the rolls. In the judgment last week, Supreme Court of India showed its intent by declaring that with more women joining judicial service, it was for the judiciary to be more cognizant of their well-being at the workplace, reinstating two women judicial officers of the Madhya Pradesh who had been sacked for inefficiency despite the fact that one of them suffered a miscarriage. Justice B.V. Nagratna said it was not enough to find comfort solely in growing number of female judicial officers if we are unable to secure for them a sensitive work environment. The judgment set aside the ouster of two civil judges, Sarita Chaudhary and Aditi Kumar Sharma, terming the termination orders punitive, arbitrary, and illegal. Just that Justice Nagratna, one of the two women judges in the court, which has the sanctioned strength of 34, had to step in is an indication of a long and difficult fight for gender equality and the need for change in mindsets and reform. In several past verdicts also, too, The court had drawn attention to gender stereotyping and discrimination against women. In her judgment, Justice Nagratna underscored the importance of having more women in the judiciary, and this holds true of other branches of the government, such as legislature and the executive. Greater repercussions of women will ensure better understanding of their needs and lead to better policies. The freedom from discrimination or equal protection of laws during pregnancy and maternity are precious rights for women workforce. Just as motherhood brings joy, a miscarriage has deep psychological, physical, and mental impact on women, and the onus is on policymakers to be aware of this and act accordingly. While gender cannot be an excuse for poor performance, it is incredible that the court had to intervene to call out wrong on a basic issue such as maternal rights. In doing so, the court has also yet again reminded not only those in power but also the larger society that age old entrenched patriarchal systems have no place in a country aspiring to emerge as a developed economy. If women are not provided a larger role in decision making, their concerns will remain invisible to policy. To achieve that goal, education has to be accessible to girls in a non discriminatory manner. At work, they must be assured of a safe and healthy environment as a basic right and guarantee. The manner in which US President Donald Trump and the Vice President JD Vance treated the Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky at the White House meet is definitely a pointer to a fascist attitude and arrogance of the right wing arm twisters. But Mr. Zelensky left like a proverbial David. Whether he is going to win the war or not for his people needs to be seen, but he has definitely won many a heart. Mr. Trump's remarks seem to ignore the reality that Russia is the aggressor in this war. The consequences will extend beyond Kiev. A Russian victory would embolden authoritarian regimes worldwide. In the end, this is not just about Ukraine, it is about credibility of the democratic world in a face of grave aggression. It was fatuous of Mr. Trump to have expected Mr. Zelensky to sign on a dotted line without offering any security guarantee. His arrogance was exposed by the use of a phrase of a third world war to arrange such a sensitive meeting in a full media glare was the height of diplomatic stupidity. The absurd and acrimonious Trump-Vance-Zelensky interaction is a new low in diplomacy, but response somewhat muted by Europe except Hungary is positive, who will bell the Trump cat. Multiple bullies at work out to create a multipolar world. Why has US President Donald Trump thrown out public tantrum and refused to deal with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky? It is time to remember what is at stake for Ukraine. Who better to tell it than John Mersenheimer, realist advocate of a multipolar world order who has consistently accused the US led West of provoking Russia to war. Exactly a week after Russian President Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, Mersenheimer explained in a media interview that any peace deal with Mr. Putin would require Ukraine to give up not just some territories or hopes of North Atlantic Treaty Organization membership. He told an interviewer that Mr. Putin wants to install in Kiev a pro-Russian government, a government that has attuned to Moscow's interest. A Ukraine that was a liberal democracy, he said, was from a Russian perspective an existential threat. But would it not be imperialism, asked the interviewer, to tell Ukrainians that they cannot be a liberal democracy? Mersenheimer replied, it's not imperialism, this is greater power politics. When you are a country like Ukraine and you live next door to a greater power like Russia, you have to pay careful attention to what the Russians think, because if you take a stake and you poke them in the eye, they are going to retaliate. Democracy simply is not realistic in a multipolar polar world, said Mersenheimer. In an ideal world, it would be wonderful if the Ukrainians were free to choose their own political system and choose their own foreign policy. But the real world, that is not feasible. Today, Mr. Trump is eager to give Mr. Putin the regime change he wants. He calls Mr. Zelensky a dictator with 4% approval rating and has suggested more than one peace is possible only if Zelensky steps down. What kind of Ukraine do Mr. Putin and Trump want? Look at other nations that live next door to greater powers like Russia, and the answer is clear. Democratic protests in Belarus and Kazakhstan have been brutally suppressed with the help of Russian military. Belarus President Alexander Lukashenko declares it is better to have a dictatorship like in Belarus than democracy like Ukraine. It should be remembered that far from instigating Mr. Zelensky to stay and fight, former US President Joe Biden has done all he could to force him flee, hoping that it would appease Mr. Putin and avert a prolonged war. In January 22, Mr. Biden had declared that NATO would be divided in case of a minor incursion, and Zelensky had to remind greater powers that there are no minor incursions and smaller nations. Mr. Biden had evacuated the US embassy from Kiev and said days before the Russian invasion that it may be a wise choice for President Zelensky to leave Ukraine. After invasion, Mr. Zelensky had to tell the US that he was looking for ammunition and not a ride. Ukraine is not the only country where Mr. Trump and Putin wants a regime in their own image. US President JD Vance and Mr. Trump's oligarch aide Elon Musk urged Germans to vote for the far-right anti-immigrant AfD. Mr. Vance told the European Union in Munich that Mr. Trump wanted to liberate European people from their internal threat, immigrants, and liberal democratic leadership that led them into Europe. For the past decade, Hungarian Prime Minister Orban had declared making his country on an illiberal democracy as his goal and to turn the EU into an illiberal project. Since then, Mr. Putin has put his weight behind the project in every way, and Mr. Vance made it clear that Mr. Trump is the new sheriff in town, wants the same, the EU aligned with Christian values, not universal human rights and democratic standards. An EU where member nations will face no censure for passing Putin style laws banning gay propaganda. Mr. Orban has the distinction of refusing to honor the International Criminal Court warrants issued against Mr. Putin and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Mr. Trump and Mr. Netanyahu voted for Mr. Putin in the United Nations. Mr. Trump treats Gaza and Ukraine as pieces of real estate at the mercy of genocidal brute bully next door. Mr. Trump has branded ethnic cleansing in Gaza with his name, turning it into an obscene AI-generated Nero's feast. He turned peace talks at the Office into a reality TV where most powerful man in the world and his henchmen and media bully an elected leader of an invaded and occupied nation. The national bullies are acting in concert to create a multipolar world, a world safe for all bullies and bigots. It is high time we stopped imagining that multiple bullies made the playground safer and that multipolar non-Western tyrants are the lesser evil regardless of the internal character of the regimes involved. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has declared support for the multipolar world. Mr. Putin has always insisted that there are two West and that his quarrel is with the West of universal democratic principles and rules. An illiberal US, United Kingdom, and EU are welcome to the multipolar world. It is the growing assertion that an illiberal international project led by Mr. Trump, Mr. Putin, Mr. Netanyahu, and China's Xi Jinping, including Narendra Modi, Mr. Orban, and European fascists, that pose greatest threat to democracy, people, peace, and planet today. To insist that the rise of this illiberal international is just the West versus the rest, business as usual is moral bankruptcy and suicidal folly, exactly as it is to quibble over the semantics of Mr. Modi's project of an illiberal Hindu only agenda. It is better late than never to take on the illiberal international and defend universalist human rights, democratic solidarity. A good start would be for Indians defending democracy to show solidarity with Ukraine defending themselves from the Putin Trump tyranny. The student and the three language debate. In the rhetoric of partisan politics surrounding the three language formula, the most important stakeholder has been forgotten: the student. First, it is the child who goes to the public government school, and no one else who should be at the very center of this debate. Students in public school form about 55% of the school enrollment in Tamil Nadu. Children in private schools increasingly rely on supplemental learning beyond school hours, coaching or tuition classes, which public school students cannot afford. Critical question is learning three or two languages essential to enable a child from public school to compete with more privileged candidates in the job market to become more productive value adding citizen. Second, while the NEP is path breaking on many accounts, there are few provisions that ignore the ground realities of public education in India, especially the primary and secondary levels. The three language formula is such issue. The NEP declares that The NEP declares that compulsory learning of three languages is intended to improve the cognitive ability of students, enable mobility for employment, and promote national integration. This very hypothesis is a problematic one. Language is a necessary tool for acquiring knowledge for communication. However, with the breathtaking progress in technology, particularly artificial intelligence, language proficiency itself will gradually lose its significance as a tool for knowledge acquisition. You could post your query in any language, in say Google Gemini. Even children in public school will hopefully soon have access either through a smart classroom. Sorry. You could post your query in any language in say Google Gemini and get an answer instantly. In the years ahead, this access will only get cheaper and better. There is, of course, indisputable evidence linking language skills with cognitive abilities, but none of which establishes proficiency in more languages will proportionately improve cognitive abilities. In fact, research suggests quite the contrary, that strong foundation in children's mother tongue is essential before introducing additional languages. A third language will certainly enable better communication and with the community that speaks that language, but that is a choice with most adults make as part of the profession that choose. Tamil Thambis quickly learn Hindi as they join the Indian Army and thrive famously. Tamilian salesmen speak flawless Marathi when they sell their wares in Maharashtra. Third, the state of primary education is pathetic, and nationally and in Tamil Nadu, as highlighted in the ASER survey 2024. Despite some good initiatives in the recent times, 88% of the Class 3 students lack basic literacy proficiency. The challenge is even greater with second language English. Many top scoring students, even from English medium public schools, struggle to adapt when transitioning to English medium instruction in college professionally, particularly in professional courses. The response to the shocking state of quality in primary and secondary education is to massively improve teaching quality and learning outcomes, and not to add one more language. There is finite time available at school to cover all subjects. With acquisition of knowledge getting easier and quicker through technology, education should increasingly focus on developing attributes such as curiosity, critical thinking, creativity, which are critical issues to success in the 21st century. There is need to provide more time and space in the curriculum for inculcating these traits rather than thrusting a third language. within this finite time, it is important to enable deeper learning than wider learning. Fourth, it is not clear how public schools would be able to find adequate and competent It is not clear how public schools would be able to find adequate and competent teachers for the third language, even assuming that even parent chooses Hindi not a variety of other languages. There is every reason to fear the quality of teachers, leading to inferior learning. Despite Tamil Nadu having one of the highest per child education budgets in the country, 80 to 90% of the budget is being spent on the teachers' salaries while infrastructure suffers. The cost of third language teachers should eat into the funds available for infrastructure. Language is a greater anchor of cultural values. National unity is indeed a foundational value, and the Constitution provides for propagation of Hindi. So long as English continues to be the official languages in examinations for central services and defense services, students from Tamil Nadu should be able to compete at a national level, and they have done successfully at several decades. So, what is the way forward? Two dimensions to the problem: politico cultural and child development. The right and wrong of a ruling party's politics on the issue is not subject to this article. The state's politic may not harm the future of students. However, if nationally the landscape is likely to change with Hindi progressively replacing English, the state politics should factor this reality and seriously consider insulating the child's development from crossfire of political battles. Since there is no academic merit in thrusting a third language on the child, particularly on primary level, Hindi could be offered as an option from the middle public school. This could be started in school in district headquarters and progressively expanded to other schools. A rigid political position could result in a generation of students that is handicapped to compete nationally. The issue should be a debate and discussion, and not a war that destroys the future of the young. So that's all. See you in the next one.